All right. For the next one of these little short videos, I want to talk about the lake. It's called Stockbridge Bowl, but really its name is Lake Mahkeenac. All right. As I've said in the previous videos, I'm kind of a numbers guy. So I'm going to treat it as a given that cleaner water, less vegetation, better recreation is good for everybody. I am not discounting it. I'm going to focus on the economics of the lake and the challenges of the lake. Here's a couple of facts. All right. Stockbridge Bowl is in relatively good shape, but it's got some problems, as we all know. There's more weeds than we would like. There's challenge of the silting of the lake as streams flow into the lake from the northern part of the lake, from Lily Brook, from the area around Kripalu. What ends up happening is the silt that comes down from those ends up at the bottom of the lake. Now, at the other end of the lake, at the southern end, you've got a dam. And the dam is at a certain level, all right? So the more silt that goes in, because the height of the lake is a constant, all right? You've got a situation where it can never go above the dam because the water goes over the spillway of the dam when it rains, all right? So the height of the lake is a relative constant because of the artificial impoundment, it's called. In other words, there's a dam at one end, but then you've got silt coming in on the bottom, and as more and more silt comes in, there's less and less water in the lake, all right? Now, some folks talk about how it might turn into a bog. Definition of a bog is where water doesn't flow, and that doesn't really make sense because we've got streams coming in and we've got outflow at the dam. It's always going to flow. The real issue is how much water is in the bowl, so to speak. Now, why is this important? All right. Lakes have cyanobacteria in them all the time. Cyanobacteria is this toxic kind of bacteria that hangs out in the middle layers of the lake, if you will. And things like severe storms, so a really bad thunderstorm, or warming water, can cause those cyanobacteria that always exist down here to come up to the surface and exist at the part that fish are in, and people are in, and dogs are in, and any kind of living thing that finds cyanobacteria poisonous occurs in. Now, at thousands of lakes around the country, cyanobacteria blooms have actually had devastating impacts on the recreational quality of a lake. Because it turns out that folks who buy homes on lakes aren't much interested in lakes they can't use for recreation. And in fact, in some municipalities, as close as New York State, this is not just in the South, you've seen repeated toxic cyanobacteria blooms cause a collapse of real estate values around that lake. That would be devastating for Stockbridge because, frankly, a whole lot of our town's budget on the revenue side comes from property values around the lake. So if those were to collapse, then surrounding property values as you get further away from the lake would be impacted too. And all of a sudden, all of our homes are worth less if we have repeated cyanobacteria blooms. So how do we avoid cyanobacteria blooms? Well, there's a couple of ways. We did a study called the Lake study, and they outline this, and it's not actually unique to that study. There's hundreds of publications that talk about cyanobacteria. And the two things that drive cyanobacteria are severe storms, because it churns the water up, and warming water. And we know the water is going to get warmer because summers are getting hotter because of climate change. All right? Now, what can you do to mitigate, to prevent blooms? The number one thing we can do, according to this Lake study, is expand the sewer system. All right? I'll get back to that in a minute. Number two thing we can do, according to this Lake study, is harvesting. Because harvesting actually takes nutrients that cyanobacteria needs, specifically phosphorus, out of the lake as the stuff is harvested and taken to folks who use it, like landscapers, in garden beds. All right. Now, another thing we can do, which is why I support it, is we can dredge the lake. Because the more silt we take out, the deeper the lake is. Deeper lakes mean that there is deeper water. And the more water you have, the cooler the water is. Because anybody who knows, if you leave a pot of water that's a quarter full out in the sun, it's going to get a lot hotter, a lot quicker than if the pot is all the way to the top. All right. The depth of the water stays cooler the more water there is between the top and the bottom. All right. So harvesting is a relatively inexpensive way to prevent cyanobacteria blooms. But the thing we really need to look at is how we expand the sewer system around the lake to remove nutrients that come from septic systems. Now, why is that important? Because once again, the nutrients from septic systems are the thing that's going to feed the cyanobacteria. All right. Nutrients are plants are a lot like people. Okay. If your diet is 2 McDonald's Big Macs for lunch and dinner every day, you're probably going to be a little bit heavier than if your diet is like, kale and chicken breasts. All right. The fact is that the more nutrients in the lake, the more things grow, and the more prone you are to cyanobacteria. All right. Now, right now, the Stockbridge sewer system stops at Bean Hill Road on the east side. So it goes all the way from Beechwood on the east side to Bean Hill Road. And the Stockbridge sewer system only goes up to the DeSisto property, roughly speaking, on the west side. That means that septics full of nutrients are at Berkshire Country Day School, at Kripalu, and on the east side at Camp Mahkeenac and at White Pines. All right. In addition to all the single-family homes like on Oak Street or all along Route 183, et cetera, et cetera. So expanding the sewer system should be a pretty important goal of the town, not only because it will result in fewer weeds in the bowl, which is great for recreation, but also in the long term could offset the warmer water and more severe storms that we're going to have with climate change. Challenge, of course, with sewer expansion is it's really, really expensive. Now, before we even consider expanding the sewer, we got to fix the sewer system we already have, because we got a lot of broken pipes. When it's not raining out, we're at something like 30% capacity at our sewer plant, run by Tommy Campetti, amazing guy, well-run system, 30% when it's not raining. And after a severe rainstorm, that can spike up to like 110%. So we're actually over the capacity of the sewer system. All right. So to make sure we have the capacity to expand, we first have to fix the broken pipes in the system. Some go back to the 1800s, the clay pipes. They're broken. And that's why the Water and Sewer Commission, working with the Selectboard on the budget, has supported this I&I study. Basically, where is water infiltrating? Where are there broken pipes so that when it rains, stuff is not just going into the ground, water is actually getting into the system and ending up in the plant. All right. Now, we already funded the I&I study that's going to snake cameras throughout that whole system and determine where these leaks are. And none of us know how much it's going to cost to actually fix those pipes. And we won't know, in all fairness, until after that work is done. Now, if we're lucky, maybe it'll cost $1 million because most of the breaks are isolated in 1 or 2 places and there's not much to dig up to fix. That might be wishful thinking. If there's breaks throughout significant portions of the sewer system, it could cost upwards of $5 or $10 million just to fix the system we have. Now, the good news is that you can borrow money to fix sewer systems at 2%. So this actually isn't something that is going to be impacted by inflation which I'm going to talk about in a future video. All right, so that's the good news. The bad news, though, is that you have to first spend that anywhere from $1 million to $10 million fixing the current system before you can even consider expanding to Everett Road or Lake Drive or White Pines or up to BCD and Kripalu. Before we can even consider that expansion, we got to first fix these pipes. And expanding all the way around the bowl alone could cost upwards of, I don't know, $20, $30 million or more. I have no idea. Largely depends on when we start, because guess what? Construction projects have significant inflation pressures right now. So even though we can borrow the money less at a constant rate at this 2%, construction projects are getting more and more expensive. So the longer we wait, the more it's going to cost over a 20-year period of that 2% borrow. So my goal and my position is we, as quickly as possible, identify and repair the breaks that we have in the current system pipes, and concurrently we fund a study as to what the priority should be to expand the sewer primarily around the lake to ensure that as few nutrients as possible get into the lake. And together, over the next 10 or 20 years, by expanding the sewer system, we then reduce the impact of warmer waters and climate change that might have on the lake. Now, in the meantime, we keep harvesting because it removes nutrients, and we get dredging done, which will cost several $1 million of town money, in addition to the money that the Stockbridge Bowl Association and the generosity of those donors gave to that project. It's going to be several $1 million of tax money to do the dredging, but that'll keep the water colder, and once again, reduce cyanobacteria. And as I said at the beginning, I believe that there's recreational benefits to doing all this work, but foundationally, what my concerns are is what repeated long-term, summer-long impacts on the lake would be from cyanobacteria outbreaks. Is that something we face today? No. We've only had one in the last 4 years. All right? But it would be wishful thinking to not anticipate that there is a larger chance of these cyanobacteria blooms in the future, and doing everything we can to defend property values and the property tax base is central and fundamental to the management of this town. There you go. That's my little talk on the lake. Thanks.